Bye, dude.
All right, so Perv, it's just you
Yep.
and me. I told my assistant to pick out some questions, but he did not.
Okay.
So take a look at chat and see if there's anything um you find interesting.
Okay. You guys start talking in chat and we'll answer some questions.
We'll just
Uh, I guess I'll go back up to like one of the things. I mean, because we can talk about this all day, but like we'll just touch
yeah,
on it.
that's gonna
Somebody
be an
said
issue,
like
right?
um porn masturbation, addiction. Um, I'm assuming since this is a PE podcast that they're saying is porn masturbation addiction like an issue for PE, and I mean the answer is it's an issue for everything.
Yeah, without a
Um,
doubt.
uh,
So I dabbled with the abyss when it comes to porn addiction and
yeah.
masturbation, and there was a point where I was jerking it at least 3 times a day. Like, it was not a fun time. My will to do
Oh, I
anything was
feel
at an
you.
all-time low. Um,
Mhm.
I was just raw too, but like it was just a compulsion, you know. It was like I need that dopamine hit. So just
But
for
that's the
quality of
definition of addiction, right? That's like the definition
yeah,
of addiction is like you do something and there's no joy in it. It's like you're drinking, you don't even want to fucking drink. Like it's just like you are compulsively following
yeah,
this reward
exactly.
pathway. That's all you're
It's
doing.
not fun, but it feels necessary at the time.
Yeah.
So any kind of addiction is going to hurt PE, but porn addiction and masturbation addiction specifically, you're chronically stressing out that tissues and you're chronically messing with your sex pathway, like your arousal pathway. So it is going to be an uphill battle
Yeah.
to see gains.
Yeah. I agree. And I think the other thing to note is that like with porn masturbation orgasm, you are messing with your erection frequency and erection quality.
Oh, for sure.
Um, and so one of the big things that I don't think we, maybe we do, maybe we don't talk about it enough is like the importance of nocturnal erections and just
Mhm.
diurnal, regular diurnal daytime erections.
Right.
Um, a lot of the tissues, most of the tissues in the penis are avascular, and so they rely on diffusion
Hmm.
to get their nutrient supply. And so our penis really relies on us getting these frequent erections to bathe
Hmm.
those tissues in nutrients. And so anytime that you are, you know, just getting yourself into a spot where you're limiting, you're narrowing what causes that arousal for you, you're limiting your growth potential there in PE, I think.
So when it comes to masturbation habits, I'm on the like one a day is probably okay. Assuming that you have a normal sex frequency too, you should probably not masturbate on the same day you have sex. But it's not going to break you. But once you start getting to the point where it becomes like, okay, on my lunch break, I'm going to masturbate, you know, that's when you really got to start worrying about it.
Yeah. Why would you say, I just want to ask, like, why did you say you wouldn't want to masturbate on the same day that you would have sex? Like, why?
Well, it's a performance thing for me. Like, the
Okay,
sex is just better if I don't masturbate beforehand. So,
that's fair. I didn't know if you had any, like,
I mean, and then it
anecdotal
might
evidence
mess with
for,
your, nocturnal erections a bit just because the tissue's tired, but, there's no science to it yet.
no. Um,
All right. The Dawn probably asked an hour ago, could there be potential benefits or downside to doing hypoxic clamping 2 weeks on off days instead of immediately post session, or doesn't it matter? So, if we are looking at the expansion and we're trying to trap that expansion for a bit, doing it right after will help with girth. But I usually clamp right after my session just because of timing. There is no reason to do it right after clamping if you're specifically going for the hypoxic benefit or the angiogenic stimulant.
yeah, I think that we need to probably do a better job of like separating. Because like the way that I talk about it to people is like there's basically three things that you can do with your penis, right? Like
Yep.
you can elongate it,
Hmm.
you can thicken it, and then you can uh, fill it. So it's
Yeah.
basically like a balloon. It's like you can stretch it long ways, you can stretch it
Yep.
circumferentially, but then you have to do something to actually fill that tissue. Um, And so, that's one of the reasons why I think confusion exists with like the utility of and when we should do clamping versus pumping, is because I don't think that people understand what the purpose of something like soft clamping is. And so like I've just
Yeah.
switched to calling it BFR training. I've literally I don't, because people will
Mhm.
say, oh, should I switch to my lots of guys will get these big deficits in their erect length and their bone press stretch flaccid,
Yeah.
and they'll be like, okay, so should I switch to girth? And it's like, well, it's not necessarily girth that you need to switch to.
It's
Um,
packing it in. Yeah.
right. It's filling that the tube with more
Yeah.
sausage, if you know what
It
I'm saying.
also doesn't help that there is a rival subreddit that says clamping's the only thing for everything for girth gains. But there's clearly different modalities that you can do with clamping just based off the research.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And to be fair, um, clamping. I mean, clamping is hypoxic, and so that's the thing. Is I'm sure that you do get overlap of benefits with that. So they're not necessarily talking about clamping for hypoxia, but hypoxia does happen when you're clamping. So in the old school, methodology, like switching from girth work to length work and then back and forth, like it, probably served much the same purpose.
Yeah.
Um,
What I was getting at is that basically on a joke for you, it's expansive clamping. And then that's what they do with like
right.
pumping. And then they don't really recommend doing sets over 10 minutes or even 5 minutes. Though if I just remember M9's work correctly. So like there's just a clear disconnect between our two communities, and that's why there's so much confusion between it. And I also like to change things on a dime. But
Well, the recommendation that was given to me by M9 was to do expansive clamping prior to extending, and I did experiment with that early on.
that was called
But it,
shock loading, just so
it
people
was called
have.
shock loading, yes, and that was, I think that's an important terminology to understand, because that is a concept that he um, promotes, and I think it has some utility to it, and I was definitely toying with something along the same lines whenever I was doing like pumping before extending. Now, for me
Yeah.
personally, I know a lot of people do that damn Pornhub video of me has like so many thousands and thousands
Yeah.
of views,
Yeah.
and I need to redo it because everybody's like, why do you pump before you extend? And I'm like, well, I don't anymore. I was just, like,
Testing. Yeah. A lot of people don't understand that.
yeah, like,
Everyone's constantly testing.
no, people don't understand, and that's the biggest thing is that I need people to understand is like, if you see me doing something or if you see me writing down something, like, that is not the gospel. It is more than likely that I am trying something or
Yeah.
testing an idea out.
Most of the
Like, it's
time we
not,
are journaling our research.
yeah,
That's really
like,
what we're
and
doing.
so I've seen people like literally misquote me, and they're like, no, Perp says to like pump before you extend. And I'm like, no, no, I don't. There
Yeah.
is a video of me doing it on the internet, but I conclusively found out that for myself, it actually doesn't make a bit of difference. What it does is it does raise your risk of getting a blister.
For pumping, yeah. But back to shock loading. To me, that was like a primitive form of tunica release. Because what we're doing is we're just stretching
Absolutely,
out the tissue in a different way. So there's
absolutely,
some
yeah,
merit to it. I just don't think you want to be doing any kind of expansion work before your length work because that's going to mess with
yeah,
collagen fibril shear stress.
yeah.
So
And I think it's important that we do. I think it's important that we do our due diligence and sort of like look at the techniques that other communities have used that have gotten them gains, and we sort of like look at, well, why did
yeah,
these work for them? And so, I think it's like it's a good thing that you and I are able to recognize, okay, well, clamping probably worked because it served the purpose of expanding the tunica, and that's our limiting factor.
even in my GERF book, I have an expansive clamping only routine. Speaking of my books, guys, when I write my books, I do not put any of like my new research in it right away. So like if you want my own definitive thoughts on what that actually works for PE, that's your best bet. But what I can't remember what I was going to say after that. Go
I
ahead.
think you were gonna pimp. I think you were gonna pimp your OnlyFans.
Oh, I'm actually trying to rework that. I'm trying to get lean first. You're going to teach me to get lean. It'll be a great time. But
Yeah.
let's see. Actually, wasn't that many questions.
But were you not talking about your Patreon? I thought you were talking about like where the freshest new theories and everything are
Oh,
happening.
well, my freshest new theories are literally spat out right on Reddit, just straight up.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
Patreon's only for coaching. I am very behind, guys. Do not try to coach me right now or be a client. Uh, God, it was. I had a
Um,
good point. I can't remember it. Go ahead.
okay. There's a question. Thoughts on NoFap? I did 60 days and I felt like I had weaker erections and maybe reduced size. Okay, so NoFap, um, whether you like subscribe to the ideology or not behind it, just for anybody that doesn't know, it's just a community that promotes no PMO, porn, masturbation, or orgasm, and you can adhere to that in as many steps as you want. Some guys just do no porn, masturbation, orgasm. Um, I do not personally think that abstaining from orgasms is healthy, and I think that there's
It is
research
not.
to back
Yeah.
that. Yeah, there's research to show that like there's actually really like there's heavy anti-cancerous benefits to regular ejaculation. Things like what 3 times a week at least that you need to
Yeah.
ejaculate.
Yeah.
It's like it severely decreases your risk of prostate cancer. Um, but um, a lot of shit happens to your brain and your body when you start to overconsume porn. And by the time that you get to the point where you're trying to do something like NoFap, it is literally like an alcoholic going cold turkey. And so if you have any sorts of expectations going into NoFap about like what may happen or what might happen, just know that that may or may not be the way that it goes because your body is literally just about to go through some seriously
Withdrawal,
foreign.
essentially.
Yes, you're going to go through withdrawals. You're going to go to really foreign places in your physiology and your neurology, and a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. I mean, like these are really deep rooted, deep seated issues for a lot of guys. I mean, a lot of us guys have been consuming porn for 20 plus years,
At this point,
and so
yeah.
like depending on depending on the frequency. Actually, interesting. I don't know if you're aware of this, BD. Like, it's really interesting. There's a website that studies. I think it's called Your Brain on Porn. There's a website that actually studies this, and one of the interesting pieces of information is that like older guys that are used to consuming like paper porn and like VHS and stuff like that, they actually recover way faster from like the cessation of porn if they have like porn induced erectile dysfunction and stuff.
Okay.
If they're used to consume if they're used to like flipping through playboys and shit, they actually recover from porn induced erectile dysfunction way faster than guys who are used to like
Because it's less
having
hardcore.
well, I mean, yeah, because the thing is like think about it. Like, if you are used to being like a subscriber to like Playboy magazine or something like that, like there's like what, like 12, 15 girls in a Playboy magazine, right?
Once a
But
month.
like,
Yeah.
if you hop on, yeah, once a month. So if you hop on, a website today, you could easily have fucking 95 tabs open and you could, consume more porn and see more naked women than our ancestors were ever going to see their entire lives
Yeah.
in one day. So that's super normal stimuli. I mean, that is just like
We
reality you
were
just
not
can't compare.
designed for it. Yeah.
No,
So
no, we were
back
literally
to
not designed.
NoFap causing a loss in size. It's because masturbation is like a form of cardio for your penis. It's what's going to keep your tissues relatively healthy. If you're not having a decent sex life, you're going to have penile atrophy. And it
Yes.
should come back quickly because it's just erection quality. But that's why masturbation is relatively important because it's like a diagnostics check for your everything else.
Yeah. Like we were saying earlier in the podcast, like your body is very ergonomic or economical with tissue. Your body doesn't want to have any more or any less tissue than it has to have. And so penile
Yep.
atrophy is one of those examples of your body being economical. You're not using your erections, and so you're just going to lose that size. And so yeah, I don't doubt that you'd have some pretty wild ass experiences and loss of size, 60 days into no fap.
Okay, that was a question for Hank. So let's see. I guess is a good turn off point. I guess we'll just talk about this for 10 minutes before we log off.
All
You
right.
said that it's a balance of chronically always try to lose tissue while maintaining the tissue you have for minimum amount of work. So would you suggest that there will be a point where your penis will get too big that you'll have to have some kind of maintenance routine?
Um, damn, that's a good question. Uh, I guess I guess it depends on what point you get to with your training. Okay, so let's think about it like this. Maybe I'm thinking my way through this because in hypertrophy in muscle, we know that you actually need only about 20 to 30% of the original
Right.
stimuli that you needed to gain in order to maintain. So I don't know that I know that I've read a lot about like, guys will say like overshoot your goals. So if you want to be seven, like get to like 7.25 or something like that.
Yeah, but that's more because
Um,
the elastic contraction afterwards, not the actual loss
yeah,
of tissue.
yeah. So in terms of like actual loss of tissue, I don't think that you would experience that much if you're regularly experiencing orgasms and erections and having, a normal, healthy sex life. I really,
Right.
I, I,
So,
I don't see why, I don't see why you would not be providing that tissue with adequate stimulation for it to retain its current size.
okay, so first let me ask you what's a normal sex life because you are more frequent than me and I'm relatively frequent, right?
Um, yeah. Um, some time ago, like I forget when it was, like a couple of years ago, the normal rate of sex actually flipped. It was that people that were unmarried actually started to have sex more frequently on a more regular basis than self-reported people that were married. Um,
Right.
but normal.
I
Um,
like what the studies I've seen, it's once a week for married people or
Jesus God,
long-term
I would
partners.
die.
Like, I mean, so many guys are still like that. So right
So
now I'm
okay,
about two or
well
three times a week.
maybe we should. Okay, so I think that I would say 3 times a week is probably what we should be aiming for in terms of like health.
That's just
Um,
total release, like even with
yes,
masturbation. So
yeah. Um, so like a big question that guys have asked me is like, oh, how has sex changed and how is it like different with your girlfriend? And I'm like,
mhm.
we've pretty much had sex twice a day for the last 3 years, so I don't know
Yeah.
if she's just keeping up with me,
Yeah, and it
So
comes down to matches of libido too, and I'm assuming your sessions aren't like an hour in the morning and an hour at night, right? Of just nothing but
no,
penetration.
not always, no. No,
Exactly.
and that's
So,
and no, and that's a really good point too, is that like when I give like guys on the forum lots of advice about sex, it's one of these things where it's like I think that what we have made sex into a lot of times is we've made it into this reductive sort of thing just about penetration.
it's
So
just a
like
dude thing.
so yeah, so like I don't know, when my girlfriend and I like we call it playing. That's like we're gonna go play or whatever.
Yeah,
And so it's just like that could include like any number of things. And so it's like, yeah, first thing in the morning usually it's like not gonna take that long, but
yeah,
I don't know, 20 minutes or so. And it's just like that's just like us waking up together. Um
right.
Afternoon, evening sessions, it's like a little bit more planned and longer. Um, but yeah,
Okay, so back to the question. Max
I,
size,
well,
or what was it? How if you'll get to a
how
point
frequent?
that you need a maintenance routine. So like I think there's going to be a point where some people are just going to need a maintenance routine no matter what because their cellular turnover rate is going to be so much higher than ours, for example. But on paper, if your tissue is working enough and fully engorging, you shouldn't have issues. But my issue is let's say you hit 10 by 7.5, like just a ridiculous amount of dick. Um, there will be a point where you cannot fully engorge it all the time. Like during masturbation, you're probably not going to be able to fully engorge it. So just because you're not going to get the same arousal response.
Do you think it has to do with like, do you think this has to do with like an absolute size, or are you thinking like it has to do with like a percentage of this person's overall gains?
Probably potential that their overall body size because it's going to be about blood supply at that point, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean,
So
I don't have a problem saying that I I imagine that somebody would eventually, this is probably going to be after years of PE and putting on a lot of size, though.
So like the biggest person I've ever seen was about 10 by 7, and he got his suspensory ligaments cut. And the next guy was 10 by like 6.5. So like I think they still do PE to some degree, but like it's hard to follow everything on the forms.
So when you talk about like suspensory ligament dissection, like okay, so suspensory ligament dissection doesn't actually add any usable length. So insofar as I understand,
Yeah, as
are you
so as
saying?
I
Are you saying?
understand it too, but apparently when he got his ligaments cut, it was just easier to hang. So it's King Snake. He worked with LG Hanger.
I
So
know.
like
Yeah, I
they
know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so he got his suspensory ligaments cut from what I remember, and then he would use
Mhm.
the LG hanger for years on end, and he eventually got to like 10.5 inches long. So
So
like,
there's potentially a compounding effect there that with the suspensory ligament dissection and then continuing to train and try and moving the insertion of the penis further and further away from the pelvis that perhaps he did gain some bit of usable
internal
length. But
length, yeah.
yeah, but I mean, because like if you think about it, like how could you not gain erect length if you like literally cut your suspensory ligament like down to your asshole? It's
Yeah,
like
and like I think it does come down to hip shape too, because like I feel like I have a relatively high insertion point. If I got mine
yeah.
cut, my non-bone press length is going to increase at least 0.5 inch.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think that's going to be the case with guys that have high erection angles and very prominent pubic bones. Um, but surgeons uh, will outright tell you that you will not gain any erect length.
Yeah,
And
and you really shouldn't expect it. If you're looking at it from
no,
a bone press direct length, you're not going to gain anything unless you actually physically pull it out with hanging.
right.
So last question that just came in. Let's see. I found in general, larger guys aren't able to keep erections.
I find that to be false.
Yeah, I find that to be false too. So I think uh, any guy is going to have ED. I think a larger penis takes longer to fill in general, but
What is
overall,
this? What is this question? Can we get some more feedback from this dude though?
less
So like I found
functionality.
in general, larger guys are less able to get and hold erect. Like, where is this coming from? Is this your
I
personal
think it's
experience
from
or is this
porn consumption.
okay?
So like just for my own soirees, there's just a notice where you see these very large guys being very
Mhm.
spongy. So like in my
So I mean,
experience,
that's really complex though, right? Because I mean,
yeah,
like, if your job is literally just like sleeping with the most gorgeous women all the time, and like, I don't think a lot of people understand that like it's not spontaneous sex. Like,
it's
you're on a
actual
freaking
experience he
set.
had. So like he would meet larger guys with softer than normal penises.
Okay. Um, I mean, I'm not going to try and refute that for everybody. I'll just say that's not true in my case.
Yeah, it's not
But
true in
but
my case, but
but
we're also chronically working
but
with
we
those
do
guys.
PE, yes,
Yeah,
and that's the thing is that may be difference. It may actually be that his experience is correct.
and we're
I
also
don't see
athletes in our own rights. Like
that's
I do a
true.
relatively high amount of cardio. You're a world class power lifter, so
Yeah, so let's assume that these larger guys have about an average instance of EQ issues as the normal guy does.
mhm,
You could easily say that if they have, I would say probably, in my estimation, just from my experience, and this is a complete total bullshit number, and don't anybody ever quote me on this, I would say that like the average person that's not doing PE that I know probably has 20 to 25% more erection quality that they could get if they started training it. Um, and so I would say that yeah, if you have a larger, member and you are lacking in your EQ, you're not the healthiest and you're not
uh-huh.
optimizing that or doing anything with it. Yeah, maybe.
So there's also a potential that they just have thinner tunicas, so they don't get as stiff, right? Because like
Yeah,
if they're
that's
bigger,
something
they're
that
easier to
yeah,
stretch, and then it's just going to be more spongy in general. You notice
yeah,
this a lot with like the very large actors; they're just more spongy, and it could just because their tunicas are so much thinner that they're able to expand so much more. It is like
yeah.
fat
Well,
cells
a lot of
holding
those
baby.
a lot of those guys have to do intracavernosal injections of PDE5 inhibitors to even get, an erection to begin with.
Really? You
Yeah,
have
like,
I'm
dude,
sure
I've
some of
heard
that
like,
info online or on the
no,
chat
like I've
room.
heard like everybody knows who like Mandingo is, right? Like I've heard
Yeah,
that he is impossible. I've heard that he is fucking impossible to work with because he has to do PD5 injection intracavernosally, and then he has like this ritual, this routine, like this like very well like outlined thing. Like he has to have like Heineken's, like, and like has to have like two of them, and it has to have like, like a fluffer on stage or something like that. And it's literally like this whole ordeal just to get him ready to go to sleep with this girl on camera. And so that's the other thing that I would say is like if people are basing this off of like porn, then they have no idea what it's like to be on like a porn set, because it's very, very much like the antithesis of, it's like the least sexy thing that you could probably imagine.
yeah.
And I'm not going to talk about why I know this, so
It's
don't ask.
in defense, Mandingo is like 50 plus at this point. So like any recent seed, he's going to be on the decline.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm talking about like any I want to say that this has been a number of years ago. This could be 3 to 5 years ago that I ran across
First
this
heard
whole
about it.
routine.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
because you always think like, oh my God, like what, it'd be amazing to meet like, Mia Malkova or whoever, like whatever, pick your favorite porn star, and you just
mhm.
be like raging hard or something like that. And it's like, no, apparently this shit's like really, really difficult, and like half of the talent of being a male porn star is just being able to
Just staying
get
erect.
spontaneous
Yeah.
erections. Yes, and just staying erect for
Well, let's
ridiculously
let's
long
think
periods
about
of
it.
time.
You have nothing but blind lights around you, a very cold room with 40 people in there with you,
People are staring at you and shit.
and a
Yeah.
camera right there. So yeah, it's
Like
not easy
all the
for
guys on
sure.
the forum, like all the guys on Reddit that talk about getting performance anxiety, like imagine that, and then having literally a whole house full of people just staring at you. So,
It's probably a lot easier with the advent of OnlyFans, but
bruh, yeah, I don't know, dude, because even then, like, I find that taking a picture of my fucking dick is just impossible.
it's a skill. I'm just gonna say that it's a
It's
skill. Like
crazy.
I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. It's not that hard for me. Getting a good
Ben,
one these days, since like I gained so much mass, very hard.
yeah,
But like getting a picture of me erect, not so hard.
Ben
So
from Millhanger was talking about that exact thing. Like he did some measurements and stuff. Like he did a nice progress report like a few weeks back, and somebody was saying something, about like his girth measurement or something like that, and he was like, "Okay, I filmed this in one shot, and like, staying hard with the fucking camera in my hand is like kind of hard, so you can piss off a little bit."
yeah,
It's
no, I
like,
mean just get a tripod, Ben. But yeah, trust me, it is a pain in the ass when I first started doing it. Um, real quick, let's see. It was about cell activation. Bell, I will touch on that in a month or two once I get more info on it. So we talked about this a bit off the stream, like in the chat, that if we stretch the cells more than the collagen, the cells will go crazy and pull a bunch of collagen. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. We don't have to go
yeah.
about into it now because it's almost 10 p.m. and I'm tired. But yeah,
I mean, I think the long and short of that is that like in theory, yes, cell activation could be very potent for us, but we don't
it's like how
necessarily
the
know
fuck are we gonna do it, first
exactly.
of all?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
Mechanistically, it's sort of like, how do you do that?
yeah,
So
so
I think that we're gonna fuck around with things like, I think we already are fucking around with things that do modulate cell activation. I think that that's potentially one of the factors or one of the reasons why tunica release technique actually
yeah,
works.
and that's a
Um,
different kind of methodology. So what I'm saying is like if you can physically stretch the satellite cells of your tunica, you will gain faster. How we can do
yeah,
that, I don't know. With release, we're doing different manipulations to cause the secretion of growth factors. So
yeah. If there was some mechanism by which we could literally just directly perform that, um, that'd be awesome.
yeah, it
But
would be great. But
I do think that there is something to like RF ultrasound and tunica release when it comes to those kinds of
ultrasound.
things.
So you think ultrasound might actually help?
I do. I actually think it would
Uh,
help because it's one of those things that anytime that you are impacting or not impacting. God, it's late. And my words are failing me.
Yeah, we're gonna
Anytime
wrap
that
this up by
you,
10.
yeah, anytime that you are challenging the cell wall and its structure, um, you're going to run into some type of compensatory effect, some type
Yeah,
of adaptation
that's
response,
gonna be
right?
like the main signal for growth. The problem is since we're dealing with
Right.
a stretchy pressure vessel, the
You
cells
have
are
to
not
get through
really gonna
so
get
much. Yes.
stretched. So
Yes.
like that's what we need to figure out, in my opinion. But it might be an impossible task.
It very well may be. But again, I think I mentioned this to you. I actually think that one of the biggest reasons that PRP works is because of the immense, like just the initial
The
trauma
stress.
of having just
Yeah.
that much fluid injected into your penis. I think it causes a massive amount of pressure on those cell walls, and so I think that the proprioception
The
is
way
just off
my
the charts.
practitioner did it, yeah, there was a lot more PRP than you would expect. I don't think he separated the PRP from the low platelet count plasma, but Brandeis said his injections were about 8 milliliters. My practitioner did about 20. So,
That is just so much. Like, good God, that is just so much
okay,
fluid.
so 20 milliliters basically got me the same girth around as I am now, and about an inch or two shorter. So 8 milliliters really wouldn't do much, at least at my size. But for an average dude, 8 to 15 milliliters is going to get them basically erect just
That's
from
what I'm
PRP.
trying to. I'm trying to even think of like what you could. Okay, so like the volume of like I'm like looking around here, like the volume of like a highlighter, like the
Yeah,
I'd say that's probably like 20 milliliters ish
yeah,
approaching.
yeah. So like,
So that's a
and remember,
lot of
most of the
fucking
tissue is
fluid.
not going to be blood. A lot of that's going to be
Right,
collagenous tissue. So like, we're talking
right,
maybe 10 to 15 milliliters. So blood is actually not going to be the determining factor for max size. It's going to be just
right.
the blood pressure rather. But that's
Yeah.
neither
And
here
I
nor
think that
there.
that's another I think that that's another one of those mechanisms that people cite with like priapism, induced megalephalus or
Yeah,
macrophallus.
macrophagus.
Megalephalus.
Megalophallus is, I think, what they call it. Whatever priapism. So we're getting really tired, aren't we?
Yeah, I'm just like I'm starting to just replace all of my science words with like fuck now, and
Yep.
I know how that's. I'm just like the fucking thing and the pressure and shit, and I don't even know who's paying attention at this point. And
Well, we still have 33 concurrent viewers, so
God damn it,
we're
go
gonna
to
wrap it up
bed.
here, guys. Well, it's probably 7 p.m. in California, but yeah,
God
so we're
damn.
gonna wrap it up here. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will edit out the clips today and tomorrow, and we'll go from there. If you guys have suggestions for topics, put them on the Reddit, All Things Mail Pod, and you could probably just comment them on this video, and I will see them. So, thanks for tuning in, guys. Thanks to Hank and Perv for collaborating with me on this. I'm hoping we can do this again soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Good night, everyone.